What they're really saying is that there needs to be an army of youth practitioners.
In the rural areas and
Chris.
I haven't actually, so
Yeah, I'll get my boy.
I want to speak to the big one.
Been on all the nationals today. The commissioner saying how bad things are.
One staff down from Andy, one staff from Toby.
Right, yeah.
from the meeting. I've got questions from Carlo and from Linda, who are senior wishes to recover about COVID. And I've got questions from Terry and Jim Hardy. Any other questions?
Number 2, please.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone, good to see you all. A couple of minutes to the last meeting, which I was not present at, but we had to get there to an accurate record. It does occur to me that the last meeting I attended was back in July, which was 2 Prime Ministers and 1 monarch ago. But hey, those minutes anyway are agreed. Declarations of interest, I think everyone knows what to do. Disclose now, and disclose the peculiar personal interests, the actual announcements by the Legal Council. Yeah, I was going to mention here, last week I met with fellow leaders and chief executives of the North Essex Councils. And that is, if you draw a line across, or the north-south line across the county of Essex, you get in the north, Epping Forest, Uttlesford, Chelmsford, Braintree, Harlow, Malden, Colchester and Tenbury. And of course that's part of Essex. So we had a meeting with those leaders, including Essex, and we together represent astonishingly 1 million people. It's a hell of a geography and a heck of a population. From Stansted International Airport in the west to the International Port of Harwich in the east. And all points in between, 2 cities, 2 of the newest cities in the country, 2 cities nonetheless in Chelmsford and Colchester, as well as many market towns, rural communities. You've got central line tube stations in Epping Forest, and you've got a heck of a coastline in Tenbury. And we've agreed to work together to see what savings can be made, and this is pertinent to an item coming up on the agenda today. In respect of sharing services, can we, for example, work together to deliver planning across either the whole of that North Essex grouping or clusters of North Essex councils? I think the lockdown has shown that local government can be delivered remotely. Many things we didn't think were possible to deliver remotely. I think Canning's a good example of that, where you might think you have to be on the ground physically, but in actual fact, it turns out you really don't most of the time. It is something where we can not only save money, we can deliver a better one service, and it will help us in the recruitment and retention of staff, which in certain areas all local authorities have real problems in doing. The big prize, I guess, the biggest prize of all is the thing we spend most money on, which is waste collection. And again, if you ever want an argument in favour of the municipal authorities, it is waste collection and disposal, because just in Essex at the moment there are 12 waste collection authorities who all collect different things in different ways. Some of them do it in-house still, some of them have private contracts with different contractors, and then you have the one disposal authority who take all that rubbish and get rid of it. And all the consequent costs and expenses, it's a vastly expensive thing to do, to collect it and to get rid of it. And undoubtedly, unquestionably, savings could be made if we could have some conformity of collection across the geography. And for people who live in the north, they don't see the maps, so the lines on the maps that we see. If you live, on the edge of Colchester, you don't think whether you're in Colchester Tenbury, you live where you live. If you're talking about the Betts factory site on Ipswich Road, Colchester, the front of which is in Colchester, the back of which is in Tenbury, but if you live there, you live in Colchester. Likewise, other parts of the county, some places like if you live in Grantham, you're technically in Essex for your postal address, but you're not for your actual county councils and stuff. So we need to get rid of those, or minimise the impact of those boundaries that we see that affect what we do, how we do it, and where we do it, and move on. And there's a strong willingness from the leaders to actually make progress on this in a way that I've never noticed before. We've talked about shared services many times over many years, but now there's a financial imperative that we're all staring down the barrel of massive cutbacks or massive financial problems if we don't make some tough decisions. And at the back of our minds is the ghost of authority. I think, to be frank, and other authorities that are close to getting into that situation, and other councils like Slough that have also slid into the pit of despair when it comes to their finances. We don't want any of the councils in North Essex to fall into that situation. So we are prepared to grasp and make tough decisions and work together for the basis of delivering better services at lower cost for residents. But yeah, we kept you informed. We're going to sign a memorandum of understanding. Obviously, no decisions will be made that don't go through the proper executive decision-making processes. Should such decisions be necessary, but at the moment it's about what can we do together. We're just looking at that and exploring. We're trying to do it with some speed and rapidity. Yes, please.
Because I think it's all very interesting, and obviously you wouldn't be looking at this unless we were, like you said, staring down the barrel of the gun because of the finances, and that's a problem been caused obviously by the government over 12 years of cutting all our revenue support line and not replacing it with any other funding. And what I think we should all be cognizant of is that bigger is always not better, and local knowledge plays a big part in local government, and the further away you get and distance away you get on running services, the less local knowledge and contact and understanding of people's areas. And we've seen it in various other aspects of planning already, where you talk about you used to have conservation, listed builders officers, conservation officers. We don't no longer have those. They're shared with other people, and you don't get the same response and the same recognition of things within your area. So I can understand you going down that route because it is a situation of desperation, and I can understand all those leaders because most of them are Tory leaders. They're trying to find an answer to the problems caused by your government. But I think we ought to look
I'll just cut across it because
but I'm just looking at various problems being caused by the government.
It's not caused by the government cutting revenue support line. The economic crisis we're facing is caused by inflation, it's caused by fuel bills, it's caused by electricity, it's the effect of having a lockdown where never went to work for 2 years. That's the reality of it, and that happened right across the world, not just in this country. So
What, 12 years? 12 years of it? 12 years of cuts?
no, we've got 12 years cuts to the economic situation that we're in. And we're also talking about the devolution offer that's available to us, trying to get more powers, more funding. So I take your point about government being to live better locally. I think that's true, but at the same time, part of that is actually making it more local by getting powers away from Westminster, away from central government. We have the most centralised form of government in the Western world in this country. Powers are centralised in Westminster in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else in the Western world, not even in America, where states there are able to make their own legislation, their own laws, raise their own taxes, etc. in a way we can't in this country. So any devolution powers down to a local level, I agree, got to do this. And those who are taking powers away from local areas, there's no talk of integrating councils. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to come in on some of it I've picked up on. I think within the planning department we've looked at potentially sharing some services, or various services to be honest, with other councils. Not just because there's a financial crisis, but because in some areas we can actually provide a better service at a lower cost, and that's primarily what we're here to do. So there's some serious good reasons to do it as well. And I agree with you, I think the financial crisis has perhaps made us look at that, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to look at. The other thing that we need to bear in mind as well is that not just tendering, but across the country, councils are struggling to recruit in certain areas. So where there's, shall we say, surplus people in one area, it makes logical sense to use those across the board if you can. But it's something I think we should look at anyway. Our job as council is to get the best deal we can for the council tax. And if that means a little bit of shared services too. But I also take on board your point, and I will be watching very carefully the local knowledge is important, you're quite right. So what we don't want to do is lose any of that as well. So it's a fine line, but it's certainly something I think we're a responsibility to look into, financial crisis or not.
Yeah, okay. Moving on to next item is item 7 on page 13 of the agenda, reference from the planning authority and planning committee, which I think Jeff is yours.
Yes, just one. Thanks, Neil. Really happy to move this again. This is the next chance consultations, and we're looking this time at two areas, those being Great Oakley and Kirby Station. Again, great deal of thanks to the local plan policy making committee for the work they've done on this, and particular thanks to the person who put together the report. I honestly believe that if you're a ward councillor in one of these reports that are coming out of this document here, so darn good, you should probably send them forever. There's so much information in there that happens to be your ward, it's going to be a brilliant thing to have. So I'm more than happy to move this. In addition, of course, there was a recommendation, again, from the local plan and policy making committee, that we look to put in a leaflet into our council tax bill, giving more information to those who live in consultation areas about their rights and responsibilities. That's something I absolutely support. I believe there was an attempt to do that last year, but they were a little bit late and there wasn't really the envelope. So I think this year we should try and get that done. So I'm happy to move that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Chairman. I welcome this. I think it's really, really important that we look at conservation areas and look at make sure areas of our communities are protected. I want to know, though, Councillor Gray, is whether after you've done all the areas of like mango trees done and Bright Sea and all the big town areas, are you going to have like a generic rural policy for conservation areas? Because there's hamlets, small hamlets like Crockett Heath and places in the rural areas. And I was wondering whether you can have a rural policy on conservation areas instead of like having like Great Oakley and Kirby. I know you're going to do them and all have been agreed, but I just want to know you're going to have there's some areas in the rurals where you've got special local importance like milestones, curbstones, signage and stuff like that. And I just want to know you're going to have a rural policy, a rural conservation area.
I think the answer to that, if I can share, is we'll work through the processes we've got. I think the idea, the goal, is to have the full conservation of the whole of Tenbury done. So I take exactly what you're saying on board. So we'll deal with the big areas first because they're the biggest. And then we'll look to rural. I'm looking over at Gary and I'm getting a nod for that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any reason why any part of Tenbury should be left out of this. The whole thing should be done right down to the smallest hamlet. Smallest hamlet's just as important as the biggest town for people who live there. So yeah.
Chairman, I welcome what Councillor Gray said. I'm sure Mr. Guyver, the Director of Planning, will make sure that will be something down the line.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll have to agree with the recommendations moved by Jeff. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bruce. So, item 8 is Michael scrutiny decision to give consent to event by September 23rd. Okay, Michael, all right?
Yes, thank you. An extremely good meeting, quite frankly, with the Homes Committee. You'll see the recommendations there. Obviously, personally, I was pleased with the little bit preceded there, where it says during the discussion with the committee chairman, and a number of other councillors indicated that the evidence presented to them identified that the portfolio holder had considered all the relevant facts and the decision reached appeared to be appropriate. Quite frankly, for me as an individual, that was very nice to hear that and quite complimentary. I've picked up exactly the recommendations that the committee made to the Cabinet, except for the last 2 or 3 lines of B, because I wasn't prepared to accept that actually came in the words of the motion from the committee, talking about the Freedom Theatre, which said, as this event had a serious and detrimental effect to Frinton's residents, its infrastructure and its businesses. I was not prepared to accept that, Leader. I felt that that was quite wrong. Not only that, it was said from a colleague who I respect, Terry Allen, it was said that it was unusual that it wasn't presented with any evidence at all. It was just said at the end of a very good meeting was carried. So my recommendations, which are at the bottom there, are in fact the committee's recommendations with the last, 2 or 3 lines deleted.
No.
So I formally move.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks. And then Mark on this chair.
Yeah, just as I as chairman, a big thank you to Michael for turning up for this one. Wasn't something I actually wanted to see on the agenda. It was, I thought more of a ward thing than a district thing, but the committee overruled me on that one. And I just wanted to say thank you to Michael because he had absolutely the world's best record taking I've ever seen for this issue. Every single question I had, Michael not only had the answer, but he had answers to the next 2 or 3 questions before I even asked him. So I was very, very happy with that, and although I couldn't make a decision for the committee at the point, and my own personal reflect what was in the report, they made absolutely the right decision. And as for the second recommendation, I made a personal note and asked the officers to put it in there that 6 of my committee did abstain from that motion. And it's been very generous of the cabinet not to report that out, I think it's only fair and transparent. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for that. Well done, I think. You're right, that is essentially a local war matter, but it's something that kicked off as a big issue with people strongly on both sides of being for or against that. I certainly got a fair bit of email traffic, and again, on both sides of the argument, people for or against. Well done, Michael. So one moved and seconded. We have to admit, that's around the section. Okay, so the next item is item 10 on page 153, Michael. That is you as well as the details applied to the sources and services descriptions in relation to the waste recycling in this one.
Yeah. Another jolly good meeting before what was set up as a task and finish group with Business. Very good meeting, extremely well supported by Andy White, I must say, at the meeting. It went through the existing arrangements that we had and made very substantial comments in their report on various aspects of the current waste services. When we first had this, unfortunately we've had a council meeting cancelled in the meantime, and it seems almost historic now. I see Mark nodding, that this goes back to June or something like that, really to the start. But the fact is, we had a list of recommendations from the committee, which I think I indicated to the Cabinet, and in a holding reply to the next formal Cabinet meeting, I did just say that I was impressed and was progressing the financial aspects and so on of the various proposals that were put forward. And my report, you want to say my report prepared by my officers is attached to this as the appendix. Obviously, there'll still be controversial issues there, Chairman, but basically if I paraphrased it and said, by and large, I'm in favour of almost everything the committee accepted. I'd love to put some of them into operation now, but in the same way as I'm warned by the officers that introducing certain services that we've got on the stocks, it's the wrong time to do it, because we just don't have the financial resources. And if we bide our time and wait on some of these things, Chairman, until such time as the Environment Act 2021 is actually put into operation by the government, which they keep delaying, that will lay down a basis of what every single authority in the country should collect in waste, and where that involves additional expense. The government has said in the legislation that they'll look to compensate authorities who are introducing a new service. So for that reason, we've held back on some things that we've got on the basis of the fact that when the government introduced this basic system, we should be able to get some financial assistance. I'm sorry, Mark, to you and your colleagues, that the replies seem almost negative in the sense that there's nothing there that I can say, yes, we're going to do tomorrow. But I'm limited all the time by our current financial situation. But I can tell you this for nothing, all of these items will be considered and are going forward with what we're considering in terms of the contract when the contract is renewed. They're all good suggestions. I was reminded by the officers, well, one or two of we looked at those before, Michael. I said, yeah, but this is coming from a different source. This is coming from an authoritative committee that's been through the whole thing you've got to look at the package, not individual items necessarily. But all I can say, Chairman, and to be quite brief, there's a lengthy report, but I move my recommendation at the bottom of page 153.
Thanks for that. Jeff, second for that, okay. And I've just noted on page 153 at the background to that, given that you were, I can't have to thank the ONS committee on the previous item, Michael. I just thought it would be worth, it did make me chuckle when I read this, your comments, Michael, where you say that colleagues, this report from the Sources and Services Overview Street Committee is far too good to just know that it's bursting with intelligent ideas. That's not something you hear about, is it?
No, it wasn't. I found it from the Lord.
Praise indeed, I thought. Praise indeed. Yeah, good.
Reading the report and the response to the portfolio over on page 154, which talks about additional capacity within the street team, and it talks about restructuring currently being undertaken. Can we be told when that restructuring is going to be completed? Will that return on an increase in additional capacity for the street scene delivery service? On 159, it said about, and I think it's a really good idea about litter picking at a different kind of bag. We're sort of contacted by members of the public at the moment where they think there's been flights in there, that piles of bags up there, when they're actually local community groups that do a really good job doing fly tipping, and that would be good to be able to identify them fly tippers, their bags as the community. So my question would be, are we going to share that information with you? Because I know Harwich Town Council's got their own litter picking equipment and encourage others to use it. We would be sharing this information around Harwich and Town Council to make sure that they know to order a supply of those bags. And just on the last one is where it mentions about rubbish on the A120, litter on the A120, and it talks about additional litter picking, which would cost 15,000. When we talk about when we want to promote and we invest money in all sorts of projects which are coming to these areas to promote our tourism, I think 15,000 a small amount of money to actually make our area look good. If we're encouraging people, thousands and thousands of people to come to the area for cycle rides or illuminating Harwich or anything else that we're putting on the air show, then we want them to go away with a good feeling that they've come to an area which is nice, looks nice and is clean, not where there's loads of litter across the road. So I'll just say on that one, I hope you give that serious consideration, because £15,000 to promote our tourism and make people feel better on visiting the area, a small amount.
Yes, only to say that I certainly know the comments that are made. As I said, that I did say to the Cabinet before we came here, and it hasn't happened and I haven't stopped doing, but I wasn't prepared to debate it all again based on the answers that were given. They're 3 months old, if you like. There's a lot of work gone into preparing them, and that's it. But I can certainly bear in mind the question about finding some arrangement to notify towns and parishes of what is being discussed at the moment, and even what came from the overall scrutiny. I'll look at that. Don't make a promise, because I shall have to be guided by what the officers say is practical about it. But certainly I have no objection at all to what you say. I've just presented the report as printed.
Okay, on the restructuring one, because not the starting one, if I may. The actual consultation around this starts on Monday. It is not about, we talked about, it is not about redundancies, it is about how we work, how we keep restructuring it in terms of our service. One of the key problems is, and this is not just in this area, this is generally, is that it is difficult to replace staff, so it's about actually how we work to re-engineer and make sure we are coming. And it is in terms of with a more and more financial envelope, so I'm not saying that that's easy, but that's the context of the restructure.
I know you want to comment on it. Can I just make one very quick, whoever wants to apologise, Michael, I can't really dispute this one. I think that everybody would say this year it has been the best it's been compared to 2 or 3 years ago, where we used to get vast amounts. And I remember driving down it around going to Whitgary one time and looking at it, because it is the first impression we get. We have had a way this time, and we can follow through that way, but we have got a more regular collection on it than we did. I may get the year wrong, but I think it was from 3 years ago, so it was just before COVID, so maybe 2, maybe 3 or 4. So you'll see a difference. But it's still not acceptable, because people still, it seems other people do it. So Ivan is absolutely right in saying it is our kind of one opportunity to get a first impression. And sometimes, because of the financial envelope, it's going to be, what are we not going to do if we're going to put that money into that? And I think that's going to be the other question.
It is a fundamental question that we have to do. And I don't take anything away from what he said. He's right, it's the showcase, the entrance into this. I mean, we've all driven down there's a lot of rubbish. It's just appalling. And you know, where's that all come from? It hasn't just blended there on the wind and days. It's been thrown out of people's cars as they've driven along. And, you know, yeah, we can blame it on foreign road riders coming off ships in Harwich. And certainly those plastic bottles with the strange liquid in them, feel like that's not really pleasant. But an awful lot of rubbish does get chucked out by people who probably live in Tenby, which is, you know, really quite appalling. And I don't know what the magic one answer is to stop people from doing it. I wish I knew we could administer it, and I could put some serious resources into that. But there doesn't seem to be enough way. So yeah, we do need to look out. I think without doubt, and it's the point I was making really, you know, I'm not disagreeing with this, the sooner we keep it, I think the less attractive it is to people to chuck rubbish. If they see it's already full of crap, then they're going, well, yeah, they're getting worse, don't they? So, you know, there is like, we do need to try to ensure that it's as smart as possible. Even though obviously it's not ours, it's the highways, highways agency, it's not called that anymore, it's called, I can't remember what it's called. No, it's not anymore, is it? It's National Highways, it's changed everything, yeah. Anyway, Gary wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you. I welcome all the comments. Mr. Davis and I, true, we've gone up and down that A120 and a lot of the A120 is either in my ward or in Castle Stockport. And the A133 also in my ward. So those are the two main arteries into the Thames, and the big 1027, the southern route. They do have a lot of problems with litter and dump rubbish and blighting and so on. But the bit says here, installing of bins will attract fly tipping and waste accumulation. Well, if you go into Colchester Borough, they've got bins in their lay-bys, and you go through onto Braintree District Council, and they've got bins in their lay-bys, and there's no fly tipping. People are using the bins to dispose of their rubbish. So if you go into on the A120 through to Colchester and through to Braintree District Council, they've got bins in their lay-bys, but in our lay-bys, on an A120, there's no bins in those lay-bys. And I would argue that if we install bins, I think the people out there would make the effort to put their rubbish in the bins. I don't think they'll attract fly tipping because it hasn't happened in the other two districts, in my view.
Whose bins are they then on those lay-bys in Colchester and Braintree? Are they district councils?
Well, they're two. The bins in Braintree District Council, they're green bins in their lay-bys. And the ones at Colchester Borough, they're not green, they're different type of bins. So the local authority do have bins in those lay-bys going to Colchester Borough and Braintree. And I can't see why we can't have it just in the lay-bys to sort of compromise to. I know it's going to be difficult to lift all of the A120. The other point is we could coincide because the people are doing roadworks all the time on that stretch of the road. And if we link it together, if we know a section of the road is going to be blocked off or closed off or sectioned off, we could possibly coincide with a lit pick at the same time while the roadworks are happening or some improvements. And that might overcome the cost of health and safety division on there because it's already been done by the RS Authority. Just suggestions.
Just actually, the ones where you've got Braintree going towards Freeport are Braintree, so that they are their responsibility of road rather than the high road. The Braintree, just to come back to you on that one, just got trouble with the graph for a lot. Those ones where they've got bins, every weekend there is writing. Every weekend people fill things up. So it's not a simple solution. I think that what we're saying is actually it's about how to keep it down so people don't get to do it, because that's what the current wants people see some days now. They want to do more, and that's it's whether that is I just talk around the gap or you're talking around the late ones. So if there was a simple solution, magic wand, I think then everybody would have done it. But I think
I'd be curious for us to look at the responsibilities of the highways operators, national highways, as what responsibilities they have in respect of rubbish and providing adequate facilities for rubbish in labour. They're providing a labour, they should be providing rubbish facilities, i.e. bin. These are contracted to us to be responsible for. You know, obviously at the end of the day, we just want to minimise and reduce waste and rubbish. Something to look at. We'll leave that on Michael to look at. Anyway, good discussion. We'll have to agree the report as moved by Michael and by Jeff. Okay, the next item is the Beach Hut strategy. On page 161, Alex.
Thank you. So I've been making the recommendation on page 162. We've been working on this for quite a long time for Beach Hut strategy. It became apparent that Beach Huts need a bit of a tidy up with various issues with things going on with them. Perhaps people were ignoring the licence conditions and other such things. So as part of that process, we have had discussions with beach hut associations. We put out a consultation which got about 2,600 responses or thereabouts. It was a consultation we didn't actually have to put out, but we wanted to do it to get some responses. And it was actually a really, really good consultation. It went out online. I think that amount of responses for a consultation that's gone out online is actually really, really good anyway. So, the main points of this are within the strategy that listening to what people had said, a lot of people thought that they had security. When they buy a beach hut, they have security, so they thought their licence was a sort of secureness or freehold, which it isn't. And if you look at adverts, you might think the same. So, part of that, we're going to move to leases in the future, so that gives people the security they want. We're going to move to commercial agreements, licenses, leases going forwards, so that if people want to rent out, they have to do it through a proper process with insurance, making sure they haven't got gas bottles and other things they're not supposed to have, making sure they're not obstructing the promenades, etc., etc. All of the things that people complain about. And also that if people have got a beach hut privately, that they can rent it out and let it out for 10 days. So that's the sort of extra added thing. But yeah, all in all, that is basically the strategy. And this is what we're going to do with this is put it out to consultation. So the strategy and everything in it that we're putting out today will go to consultation and then come back into cabinet for a final agreement in February. So everything in there is still debated.
Thanks. I just moved the recommendation over 162. I'm happy to touch on that myself. I think it's a really good piece of work that's been done here. The consultation with beach hut owners, but everyone, frankly, has been wide and thorough and sort of pre-consultation exercise. What we decided to do here today is to send this draft strategy out for consultation to get comments back before we adopt anything as a council. Any comments, Gary?
I'd like to say, Chairman, thank you for Councillor Porter for coming to my beach task and finish group, and Councillor Facey and I and Councillor Coblin now with Mike Carron last week, and we had a delightful walk from Frinton and Bolton back, and there was an eye-opener of what the beach huts and what we've got, so some of the verandas they've got, and some pieces of land that we've taken and things. So Mike Carron's taken photos and looked at bits and pieces, and I have to say, it is good, and I think the Beach Hut associations will be pleased. Because they came along, Brighton, Walton and Frinton came to one of our task and finish group sessions, and they told us their concerns, their worries, what their members' concerns are, and I think actually it really, really is good. And Councillor Porter, please go back to your officers and say thank you for putting together a really good final report. I'd be interested to see responses from the consultation afterwards and see how we go from there. But overall, it's really, really positive, and I learned so much about beach hut. It's unbelievable. And council place in Ireland, we went up and down, we were looking at the beach huts and the colours and the design and stuff. People take a lot of care and attention about the precious little beach hut on the seaside. I spoke to a few, there was during half term, there were a few people out there using their beach hut at the time. I asked some of the people there, how long have you had your beach hut, and why do you come here, and things like that. And overall, it's positive, and people say they like coming here because it's a nice little place to go, they can walk along the beach and things. So yeah, it's something to be proud of, and I'm very pleased at the outcome of the so far draft strategy.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, looking at onto deep, I'm not now, so I haven't got a clear interest. I'm not against enforcement of any kind, but because I know we'll all be open to criticism if all of a sudden local people see enforcement on beach huts when they're still critical about enforcement on other things, when they walk around and see untidy sites and not enough enforcement being done to tidy that up. So I think we need to be careful when we start using the stick of enforcement on local residents, because they'll be saying, oh, hold on a minute, we're being called for enforcement on other things. So I think we need to do that with a light touch to start with. But on the issue of licensing, it also says an increase in the amount of money to pay. When you go out for consultation, will you be telling people how much their increase is going to be so they can respond to that? Any concerns? Because I do know beach hut users, beach hut users and owners, the same sort of people who can't afford to go on holiday often. They stay at home because that's the only bit of enjoyment during the summer that they've got with their families. That's why they hold them so dearly within their families as an opportunity to enjoy that space. And just on the other issue that says removal of adaptations, because I looked through it and it says about balconies and verandas and whatever. Does it also include, because lots of people have put block paving outside their beach huts, are we telling them they've got to remove that as well? Because a lot of them use that as entrance into their doorways because of the grass not being screened and that around their beach huts and around their front doors. I think there'd be a huge amount of people going to have to remove them if you went down that's a good one.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to come back on that.
If I just start with the first, the licence increases. So that would be, I mean, at the moment, I think there's a lot of people don't realise how cheap some of these licences are actually, but there's a bit of £180 a year, which is not at all. Obviously, when we're talking about the increases, we'd be mostly talking about the commercial side of it, because if you're going to be coming into a business idea and having a commercial licence, then you should be going through a proper tender process and paying the appropriate fee for having that business on the seafront. Like all businesses on the seafront do the same process. They can't just sort of walk up and pay the same as a private customer. And then if it moved over to leases, obviously the prices would change on those, because a licence offers no security, and a lease suddenly would offer, and the discussion of how those leases would look would definitely be something that goes forward. As to whether they're like a year or 3 years or 5 years, but that would then offer a properly secure location. And then that leads us into what you were saying about adaptation. So within the licence conditions and the bylaws, you're not allowed to build structures. You're not, the beach hut is you're licensed to have it on a plot, and you can put it on that plot. So anything you put outside of that plot, you're unlicensed for. And obviously a licence isn't interest in land, so it's not like if you've got a freehold plot and then you start expanding into a bit of land next to it. This is actually council land, but people are sort of doing some patios, and in some cases large verandas. So the answer to that one is that if we move over to a lease structure, we can start looking at those things, and they'd have to be individual, and then we can decide whether the whole plot can be leased.
surface with the extra bits in, or in some cases maybe it could, because some of these, some of the verandas might have been stable or basically unsafe, or they might be causing damage, or in cases with block pavement it actually might be a walk-through, because there are places like Brighton where some of the block pavement is a little bit wobbly, and to be honest, if you walk along it, it's not the safest thing. So there's still more to be done on that side of it in terms of how exactly that would work, because we've put a separate section in with moving forwards with how we go with beach hut specifications and how the leases would fit on the land, as it were. And then just because obviously you also mentioned, I forgot what I was going to say. Enforcement. Yes. So enforcement, that would take away that element if we can incorporate into that. So it's, because even the colours with beach huts, there is actually a palette you're supposed to stick to. It's a very basic, bland colour. Most people ignore it. So it would be, trying to change the position. So we want bright colours. We want sort of beige and brown beach huts. We want some nice colourful beach huts. So just trying to incorporate all of these things and make it work a lot better. So the enforcement part of it hopefully won't actually be necessary, because we'll be able to incorporate it. And the enforcement, if there was any, would be very limited to things that were unsafe or whatever. If people didn't want to take out that release because they don't actually want that bit that somebody else put there at some point with their responsibility of it. That would have to be worked through, so it would be quite a sort of complicated process actually. Sort it all out, but that would kind of alleviate that issue of having to go around enforcing it.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks.
I need to declare an interest in this because my family owns beach huts. But you're going back to the unevenness, particularly in Brighton, see. We've had our beach hut for 35 years and it's got a cement piece out the front, never moved in it, it's always been there. But it's flat. It's got that. Whereas when we had our title surgeries and we lost all our beach huts, we come back in, putting down these patio areas, and we've got several big lips in there, which is the danger we've found. So I must say it's a very good report, and I would welcome anything that. Most of them have got some advantages, but they've got to be less flat. It's got to become a safety issue more than anything. And going on to those that rent out, luckily, we don't rent ours out, but what good income we're declaring it. So, I'm all for that. It's a good report.
Well, thanks for that. Well said. I think Alex deserves a lot of credit because he's put a huge amount of work into this and a lot of passion and enthusiasm to try and get this right. And it's not about attacking or vilifying any one section, but it's about making this fair, so it's a better beach hut service for the vast majority of people that have beach huts, as well as being fair to people in the district who effectively own the land that the beach huts sit on but don't have a beach hut. Essentially, it's not just making sure that their assets are being properly and appropriately managed on their behalf by us as the local authority. And, as James just alluded to, there are a few people who are renting out a culture of beach huts and bringing in an income, certainly in the summertime, of thousands and thousands of pounds a month. Very nice, income too, thank you very much, without having to go through any kind of procurement or tender process, as other people might who are effectively running a business on Chatham District Council owned land. So just sort of regularising some of those things. And I think you're right, Janet, this is a really, really good report. As I say, I'd actually Alex for all of these now. Our officers as well have brought a lot of passion into making this right and getting this to the point where there's a really good Scouts consultation. I'm sure lots of feedback will come back here, lots of comments, suggestions, revisions, changes can be made going forward as we get the feedback from the consultation. But in the meantime, I would urge all ward councillors to speak to their residents who own beach huts or beach hut tenants or have an interest in any way in beach huts, to read this thoroughly and to make whatever comments they feel appropriate by way of response. In the meantime, I'm sorry, Mark, I beg your pardon, I'm written your name down. I beg your pardon, I wasn't
I'm sure you didn't mean to do it on purpose.
I've even got the name written down, I apologise.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll leave the deep dive to the task and finish. It's not the place to do it. One quick question for the portfolio holder and then an observation. leases. Are we the first district council to do this, or we've done this, it's been done elsewhere, and we've got some history around what the legal ramifications of that are? So that's that one. And then around the consultation, it was interesting to notice that nearly 40% of the people who applied didn't live in Tennant and didn't have a beach license. And I found that really interesting. And I think, that very beginning of the consultation, it might be a really handy thing to do with a lot of consultations. If you'd have just gone on without that piece of information, then this whole consultation would be skewed in a different direction. And we have people who, these probably people who rented, people who sold like big private hires, and said, look, we need you to come in and say this. And they made consultation down in a direction that was suitable for them. But when you take all of that out, you can see what's wrong. And so without that first bit of consultation, I think this could have been a totally different consultation. So it's a good report, well done on the consultation. It was one of those, I'm always wary of consultation, it always starts with, do you want something? And then we're going to go down this route because that's where we're headed. And this consultation did do it, it was fair and transparent, so well done on that.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, you asked me a question, but you can remind me. Leases. Yeah, so it has been done before. Got experience of doing it elsewhere. So it has been done. So it's something that it works basically. It gives security to the people. And on the consultation, as you said, I mean, obviously it didn't have to be done at all. This part of it. I was really keen for it to go out to everybody, not just people that got a beach. I wanted it to be an open consultation so anybody could go. So if it was the people that come and renting, they could tell them to go online and do it, whatever, so that everybody could have their side of it, which is reflected in the fact that we've got so many responses. It's a lot of responses. And it was really, really helpful to see what people say, because it was difficult to know, what would come across. And we did state exactly what we were thinking, and the questions were really clear. There was nothing hidden. And people gave their views on it, and it was a really, really good bit of work. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just get at least a few things.
I was just going to say, with regards to leases being used elsewhere for beach huts, yes, they've been used across, this approach has been used across the country for decades now. So we are behind the curve on this one, I think it's fair to say. And the other thing as well is, I think what has become very apparent from the whole consultation exercise, and even before the consultation started, when we started to get inquiries from the public and beach hut owners, they thought they had more protection than they have. So actually, I think this is a positive step forward by actually saying, we're listening and there is an alternative legal occupation of that land. And, you want more security of tenure, we can give you more security of tenure. And picking up on the specification point, this is the opportunity in those leases then to say, this is what the beach hut area covers, this is what you're required to do, and it's a lot more structured and a lot clearer for everybody, users, as well as visitors and things. So I welcome this as a way forward as well, and I think it's a good thing for Tennant to be considering at this point.
Yeah, thank you. And on that, we have to agree the thank you, that is agreed. Well done. I'll move swiftly on to item 12, which is financial performance general update on report 2 on her 10th. I'm going to go to the recommendation on page 203 as printed, and I'll take a second Paul just to please do that. If I could ask the finance section 151 officer to just give us a bit of background to it.
Yes, thank you. The reason we discussed at the start of the meeting was it's unusual times for international and global. I think this is where the report set in that context. And in terms of the scale of the problem, I think for myself, I've been in local government for 34 years. I think this is one of the biggest challenges I think about the financial aspects. So it's a major challenge. And I think up and down the country, local authorities will find themselves in a situation. I think on that sense, I think it can be positive. I think we are, it's challenges ahead, we're in a strong position in terms of where we've come from and how we've dealt with the forecasts over the last few years. Clearly there's volatility in every line of that forecast that's on Appendix 3 to report. So it is difficult to forecast with any great level of certainty. So in that sense, we're at risk going forward. However, in terms of numbers, you've got to put a stake in the ground. You've got to come up with a number. You can't just sort of scratch heads and bits and pieces. So I think the forecast is based on that kind of balance between pessimism and optimism. You don't want to go any extreme of those. You've got to try and find a place in it. So I think exactly what the forecast is trying to do is trying to find that balance between those two things. In terms of positive, I think there is a little, when we forecast this time of year, there is a little bit of pessimism in there. I think some of those items that we'll see coming through as we kind of firm up on some of those numbers will be a little bit more favourable. I think it's fair to say they won't be favourable in terms of reducing the budget gap down to near zero, but it will help. But with that in mind, they can easily offset, and we'll have favourable things on, say, income side, but equally there's things I'm sure will emerge as we develop the budget over the coming weeks and months that may offset any favourable positions that come through. In terms of the gaps, and these are the large numbers, so in terms of the 23-24 position, the budget gap is just over 4 million. Just in 23-24, and the appendices hopefully will give that breakdown of where that's come from. One of the biggest items down towards the bottom of that appendix 3A, which is the inflationary impact, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the damage in terms of the numbers increasing. So in 23-24, a budget gap of 4 million. You wind back into 22-23, those things that are challenging us in 23-24, they're here already. And they're not going to get to know them on the first of April, they're here already, and we're dealing with some of those things with the local issues. In the report talks about the crematorium being on operational for the first half of the year. Yes, we've got to deal with that, that's a local issue, as well as the other things we're seeing on a national and global level. So we look at numbers again on Appendix 1, which is dealing with those issues that are emerging in 22-23 as well. You've got just over £3 million of issues within this current year as well. So what we try to do is fund those, is look at those, be cited on all these things that are upcoming the best we can, both on favourable issues, both and on things that are going to sort of kick us up the backside. Let's be cited on those. Let's manage the position going forward. But taking those together, we've got over £7 million budget gap. So we've got to find £7 million over 22-23 and 23-24. As we started the conversation back in October, it was really the key sort of solution to that was refocusing, revisiting the existing budgets that we've got. And again, on Appendix 1, it does, in Section 3, it does start to piece together how we can fund the budget gap over the 22-23 and 23-24. So it kind of builds on the discussion we had back in October. So the good thing about the financial forecast, I think where we're in a positive position compared to a lot of the local authorities is that the financial forecast approach in 10 years gives us a flexibility. There is no need to make knee-jerk decisions now. Some authorities will be making knee-jerk decisions between now and the 1st of April to do those savings. I think the long-term forecast gives the ability to take stock, let's look at where we are, make those informed decisions as we go through into 23-24. Having said that, if we've got to do the savings in 24, 25, 26, that process has got to start sooner rather than later. We've got to go through the last process to do that. But it does give us the flexibility to look at over the next 1 to 2 years rather than having to do anything sort of knee-jerk quickly. It's worth touching on the fact that the forecast at the moment doesn't include any government support. I think the noises that come out of government is that it's a rainy day, you've got money for a rainy day, this is a rainy day, we expect you to use that cash to set aside. This is exactly what this forecast is looking at, is using those reserves. But with that comes the obvious risk is it's one-off money, you can only use it once, it doesn't result in a problem going forward. And so I think, again, in terms of the savings, I think that's the safety valve, in terms of what level of savings we've got to find. And line 15 on Appendix 3 sets those numbers out, which means that we've got £1 million in 24-25 to find, based on car forecast rising to over £4 million in 25-26, and that's a major challenge for the size of us. Our net budget is about 14 million, so we put those sorts of numbers in terms of that context. That's a big ask and a major challenge for us going forward. But going forwards, we said we've got time, we've now got to work on the framework how to do that. So we'll have discussions around how we go forward with that framework, how we identify the savings. And quickly touching on, I know the report touched on it, and I think it's worth saying is the HRA is not immune. We talk about general funding, the HRA is not immune to those challenges, and we worked up a 30 business plan at the moment, which will come back to cabinet in December. So that's where we are sort of financially. We're in a good position going forward. Hopefully that gives some good highlights of where we are financially, but obviously we'll go through this in a lot more detail as the forecast will develop. The invoice went out to group leaders, hopefully coming under the skin of this as well, because again, in this form you can't really get to, because the report's quite a bit of a beast, isn't it, and trying to get through some of that because it's a work way through that. And again, working with the rules of service delivery committee over the next sort of few weeks. So I hope that's a helpful summary of the position that the council finds itself in today.
Richard, that's excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd like to say a couple of words on it. I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting how I chair a meeting of the North Essex councils where there's a strong appetite to look at ways we can work together to be more efficient in terms of the amount of money spending on delivering services. With no desire to send cuts in services, but can we save money in services that we haven't delivered working together? And the reason that there's a strong debate is because leaders recognise the situation that we're in, articulated by finance. And also because we have seen other local authorities, even within Essex, that have gone down quite spectacularly, quite horrifyingly, and have gone into terrible financial situations that are difficult to imagine how they could have ever got into the problems they got into. Places like Paradise now and others, we saw, low country organisations forced upon Northamptonshire because Camden Council got into financial problems. The districts were sort of all doing okay, but they still got sucked into that reorganisation that they didn't particularly want as a way of managing the debt and spreading it out. And we don't want to be in that position. And Grant Ford, I think, have just done a report on some of the common themes between authorities that have gone down spectacularly financially. And the one thing that they have in common is a sense of denial and a failure to accept that this is happening, and a failure of communication and a failure of openness and transparency and getting ahead of the game, basically. If we manage this right, if we're open and transparent about it, we'll get through this and it'll be fine. We'll still be able to deliver excellent services to our residents. But if we put our heads in the sand and pretend this isn't happening, or it'll just go away at some point, it won't, and we'll end up as another Slough authority having a commissioner sent in, which is a situation we absolutely don't want to do, because that's certainly for our residents. So it's tough to hear, it's tough to tell you, Mark. We are going to have to go through every single line of our budgets. Mark is here today. I'm sure he's already sharpening his course for the coming over in the scrutiny. I didn't mean an attack. I just mean that you're going to have to be extra sharp going through every single line of this.
Oh, we're sharp.
Exactly. And we all need you to be going forward. It's a difficult situation. But as I say, if you look, there's not a lot of detail. I'm not suggesting everyone should have taken this all in by now. As you study these figures, there are suggestions there. There's ways forward where yes, it's going to be tough. Yes, it's going to hurt, but we can get through it. We are going to make this authority, in the years going forward, it's highly likely this economic situation likely to get a lot worse before it gets better. We are going to have to make some tough decisions as a council about some of the services we currently deliver, whether we continue to deliver those services going forward or do it in the same way. It would be reckless and irresponsible if we didn't say that out loud. Comments? Ivan?
Yeah, Thank you, and thanks to the officers, and we probably will take up on the offer, Richard, to sit with either the group or either the opposition, I think, and go through this. It'd be interesting to know from the officer, because it's been mentioned a couple of times about it's down to global problems. It'd be interesting to know from the officer what position we would have been in if over the last 12 years we hadn't had cuts to our revenue support grant introduced by the government. And that'd be interesting to see what the picture then would be if those cuts hadn't been made. So I wonder if we could have that, what our financial position would be if we hadn't had those cuts. And we've mentioned a couple of times about it's harder to recruit, and that's why we're looking at shared services. But if you talk to a lot of, if you sit down and talk to a lot, and I have done, not only at County Council and other areas of local government, we talk to officers in various positions, whether it be highways or whatever. The reason that you're finding it hard over the years to actually now recruit public sector workers is because there's better offers on within the private sector, and it's because of the pay freezes and pay cap, which have been gone, and the reductions in pension funds and everything, which has been going on for the last 12 years. So that has hit us. It's not the reason that we can't recruit, it's because they can get better offers now, when public sector used to be the prime job out there with all the benefits that attracted the best people into. Now we're struggling to get them. But when you look at this, and I know Richard's given a good overview of it and put a positive on it, but it's very bleak, because you're talking about even your golden rule of not using one-off money payments, which we've always said we wouldn't do, to actually fill the budget gap, to just keep the council going. We're talking about not having any money available after 2023 to invest in future projects, because money's gone. It actually says in here, and I think this was one of yours, leader, about putting money into a rural urban infrastructure fund. You've now removed that £1 million for that and spent it on something else. So you're really stepping back from any investment in the rural infrastructure fund which you wanted to put in place. And you talked about funding gaps, and you talked about unbudgeted increases in costs of 3.3 million. Well, that was 35 million when I was at Essex County Council the other day. So the overall picture, I know we can try and dress that up, that's just happened overnight. It's not. It's been a long-term funding problem which has not been improved by introducing fair funding formulas or business rate retention. Nothing has actually been given back. In actual fact, there's an old saying, what we used to have on the docks when we were in trouble, is that we've been sold down the river, local government, by the government. We're down the river without paddle. And now we're having to scrape around and find a way of surviving. And they've just deserted local government. I said it the other day at County Council. They've got no respect for local government, otherwise they wouldn't have put us in this position. And I can understand why officers are leaving, because they're under stress, and they're also, their conditions have been worsened over the years. But it's a good chance of trying to put a positive picture on it, but it's very bleak as far as I'm concerned. Local government terms.
Thanks, I'll get Ian to comment on.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much indeed. And actually, your picture that was indeed, I don't think you were trying to, and certainly Richard wasn't in the conversation we heard, are trying to represent what we're saying is we are finding a way forward for this council. We're finding a way forward in year 22-23, 23-24. This is not easy, this is not wrapping up in any nice way, and in terms of what you see in here, this is very open, because we're putting out there what we're taking money out of. Now, politically or not, people will make what it is of it. But actually, we want to be open and honest and out there for all members. And not only do we do it here, we're having a group leaders meeting, we talk to all members and non-members briefings, we put the cabinet, so as your point, I think the last cabinet item was, don't just do it all those briefings, go get in the public as well, and we're absolutely doing that. So that. One thing which I would say to you while we instruct officers that we won't do, because it wouldn't be appropriate, is to look back and reflect on politics and turn around and say, oh, we're 2010 because that's when a change of government came in. You may, as politicians, want to make those points, and we will leave you to do that, but it would not be right for officers to be looking back, and also we'd be making complete conjectures, because we wouldn't know. You come to a T junction, you turn left, you turn right, you never know what it would be like if you've gone a different way. And in terms of officers, all we can do is look at the situation in front of us and make recommendations to you as members. If you then want to make your politics and turn and throw that on, we'll absolutely leave that to you. But our one will be about spending our officers' time to be spent on finding solutions, not reflecting back on what could have been or what didn't happen.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm agenda sharing at the moment, I picked up last month. On page 211, where you've got council tax increased by £5 over and above, is there going to be any more than the 2%? Because is there not something that is in the pipeline that a band D, if you want to increase any more than 2%, you've got to go to a referendum?
Yeah, that was based on £5 historically. Unfortunately, the government confirmed quite late in the process, are we allowed to do £5? Hopefully, the press support is done in the last few years, so we expect that to be the same. Referendum threshold, £5.
And the other thing, slightly on employing staff, and this perhaps being shown in lecture, it was not just us that has trouble with staff, particularly qualified staff. And although we made the education that we might not pay more, I don't always agree with that. It is across the country. You know, there is not qualified staff to bring into these positions. So I think to say a little bit that if we don't pay enough is a little bit unfair.
Okay, thank you. Interesting report, much work to do. Done. Are we happy to agree that? Anyway, yes. Second report, thank you. The next item is item 13, which is your report, isn't it? Council tax Portsmouth.
Thank you, Chairman. Similarly to the last few years, and with the aim of providing some stability at a time where we are all facing some tough financial challenges, I am not proposing to make any changes to the various schemes and policies set out in the report. 2022-23 is the first year that we introduced council tax premiums as set out within the report. The number of empty properties that the tax is charged is decreasing. As we have said in the past, the more success we have in bringing empty properties back into use, the less income we will receive, which is a balance we are happy to see. So, Chairman, I'd like to move the report.
Okay, it's on page 252, recommendation, just seconding it. Thanks for that. Yeah, we took the bold decision that could see us getting 3 times the rate of council tax after property's been unoccupied and unfurnished for over 10 years. And, we don't want to be collecting the money, and we want those properties brought back into occupation and use as residential homes. Not much to say, well done, Paul. Good report, and this is in the comments on, we have to agree now? That is agreed, thank you. The last item I've got on my agenda today is report of the Management Officer on the Ombudsman's findings of maladministration. Page 5. The report is for information only, but it has to be reported to Cabinet, so I have to move it for information. Seconded.
Okay. Just one question, because on the case 1, it says at the final paragraph, in a further measure is to review the process for handling medical assessments and has carried out further work to ensure medical assessments are timely, outcome and communicated with applicants. What is timely? Have we an idea of what the situation is? How we improve? what was it and what is it going to be now? Because I think for us, looking after our residents, I know I deal with housing issues and people are saying they've got medical assessments they need looking at. I didn't realise there was delays, to be fair.
Yeah, and I won't also go into details of the cases quite right. They do actually differ slightly in terms of some of the requirements, as you know. And what I think will probably be better to do is to give you a written response and sort of circulate it to all, because there are requirements, but there aren't really things. The other thing on it is that we'll, as I reiterated, will be a general response if we're around individual cases of that. Because what you want to know about as members is what are you looking for in terms of standards when we go forward. If it's helpful, and apologies for sort of saying this, I'm happy to do it outside and sort of circulate, but it might also be worth sort of actually having a wider briefing for members at some stage with it, and we'll perhaps put something out as well, just so that members are more aware, because you all get housing requests. And so I'll sort something out and have more of a briefing to that. But now I'll just take a moment to say that we could actually ask the newly awarded Essex Housing Professional of the Year, who works at Tenbury District Council, to also to comment on that. Lee has just won the Essex Housing Professional of the Year award. So
I can confidently predict it, that's the last time you'll get around the floor. But well done, well done. That item was moved and seconded. We have to agree. All right. Thanks. It's been an interesting live meeting. Thank you all for coming and engaging, and see you all next time soon.